on episode 9. What happens to the hidden cost of untransferred wisdom? Welcome to Ask the Business Doctor podcast. I'm Dr. Sakira Jackson, the CEO Whisperer. And this is where we stop treating business symptoms like random problems and start diagnosing what's really happening beneath. I look at businesses through what I call the triple helix of wisdom, whether it's biblical wisdom, business wisdom, or behavioral wisdom, because most business problems and symptoms are really a reflection of something else. That something else is structural, stewardship, or human behavior. Today, we are talking about the hidden costs of untransferred wisdom. Every business has wisdom somewhere. The question is, where does that wisdom live? Does it live in a system, a process, a team, a framework, a training, a method, a module, or does it live inside of your head as the CEO and founder of a company? When wisdom is not transferred, the business pays for it. What is not transferred cannot multiply. What is not transferred cannot scale. So we have to look at this and say the untransferred wisdom shows up in costly ways. So I'm going to ask you a question. People keep asking the same thing because the answer's never been captured. Let me say that again. Your team or your clients keep asking the same thing because the answer has never been captured. So, what does that mean? It means that that's a repeated question. That's wisdom that maybe you know and your team doesn't know. Or maybe it shows up as inconsistent quality. That means that the work changes depending on who's doing it and who remembers what to do. That's a problem. Because if you're the only person who knows what to do, or your team has to always call you to find out what to do, that's wisdom that's costing you money. It's costing you money. How about slow decisions? Everything waits for one person who knows. This could be, where do we keep the X, Y, and Z? Or how do we do the ABC? Any of those is showing you a cost of wisdom, because of every time something needs to be done, nobody knows where or how to get it done. It's going to show up as inconsistent quality because people are having to make decisions on the fly. Another place is slow decision making. So think about it. If everything waits for just you to make a decision because you're the only one that knows, it also means that you can potentially lose sales because you're the only one that knows. You're the only one who can decide. A lot of times it shows up with leadership fatigue. A lot of owners have leadership fatigue. This is that you carry all the weight of all the decisions, and there is no consistent process for decision making. Those inability to make decisions, or the fact that you're the only person who can make a decision, gets heavy. It gets tiring. Another way that it shows up as a cost is client confusion, because when the clients can feel the difference from one person to another, there's inconsistent service delivery, or if the client only wants to work with you and they're confused about why they need to work with someone else, you may lose that business, and that's a definite cost. It's a loss of revenue and a loss of reputation, because clients are more likely to report bad service than they are to announce good service. The last cost that you can look for is a lost legacy. What does a lost legacy mean? It's when a person leaves your company and the wisdom leaves. They've been with your company for 10 years. You didn't capture their knowledge. You don't have it in a process or a procedure, and they get a new job, they retire, they pass on, whatever the case may be. That legacy is lost, and that's a cost that comes to your company. When wisdom is not transferred, leaders often blame people. So you would say, well, Mary Jane just retired and she should have told somebody how she did it. That's blaming, because it's your responsibility as the fiduciary of the company to make sure that the processes are documented. You might see the blame game show up with words like, they should know better, they're not paying attention, they're making the same mistakes, they're just not ready, or they don't think like me. All of those things are costs because you lose business, you lose reputation, you lose results. The next thing you want to think about is, maybe they're not failing because they lack intelligence. Maybe they're failing because you've never told them, you've never written it down, so the wisdom has not been made visible for them. You can't hold people accountable for the wisdom that you never transferred. So if you don't tell the people, if you don't show the people, if you don't write it down so it can be passed on, the blame game should be looking directly at you. Again, you can't hold people accountable for wisdom you never transferred. The triple helix that we talked about and we talk about every week is with regard to looking at wisdom. So when we think about it, biblical wisdom is meant to be taught, to be remembered. When the wisdom is meant to be written down and passed on, if it's not written down, the person who's meant to receive it can't receive it because it wasn't written down. Now, you might say, well, we don't write things in procedure manuals and that. We're not talking about it from the actual physical writing down. This can be a recorded video, it can be an AI produced manual, it can be an audio document, but it needs to be captured because that's how it is remembered, that's how it's repeated, and that's how it's passed down. Wisdom is for the people who are connected to the assignment, and you have to make sure that you make sure the transfer is done. Legacy requires transfer, and you can't build a legacy for something you don't pass on. The biblical lens is the first one. That's the legacy. That's the writing down and the capturing. The second lens, the business wisdom lens, is transfer protects your company. In a business, transfer protects your value. If your method, your standard, your process, your decision logic, your client experience is not documented, then your company is vulnerable. Now, what would it be vulnerable to? Turnover, inconsistent service delivery, team exhaustion, leader exhaustion, client dissatisfaction, stalled growth in your company. These kinds of things cost you money. So you have to be aware of what you are potentially vulnerable to because you didn't write down the process. And then the last one is behavioral wisdom. And I talked about this before. Experts forget what they know. So let's say Joe's been working for you for 10 years and he just knows how to go in and provide the service and ask the right questions so that the client doesn't just use the service, he upsells them into a higher level service. That wisdom of what they know is probably something he's forgotten. Behavioral experts often forget what they know because it's a behavior that they're not really thinking about. Remember, the subconscious mind, its job is to automate repetitive tasks. So if it's something that he continually does over and over and over again, he probably forgets that he does it because it becomes so natural and so automated that he doesn't even think that it's something unusual or extra. When you've done something for years, you stop noticing your own judgment. You think it's obvious, and obvious to you is not necessarily obvious to the next person because it's not their lived experience. I want you to remember, if they have a manual, they can read it. And if they're trying to read the manual, but the manual's only in your nervous system, then they will never know how to repeat that service delivery at the quality and the level of excellence that you require. Here's a way that you can check for wisdom transfer in your business. Number one, look for and identify any repeated questions. What do people ask you over and over again? Number two, identify the invisible standard. What do you know how to do right and excellent that you haven't told anybody else? What do you know about what's risky or unacceptable, but you haven't transferred that or trained somebody else? What do you know that you use as a method to deliver your service, but it isn't written down? The third thing you want to do is to identify your decision-making logic. When you're going through and providing the service to your clients, what do you consider before you make a wise decision? Capture the questions that you ask yourself before you finalize delivering the service. And that's also step number 4, capturing it. If you capture it in a checklist, a script, a framework, if you write it down as a standard operating procedure or put it in a training video, any one of those is going to be able to be used by the next person. Documentation is not transfer by itself. It's not just through osmosis. You can't telepathically tell the next person what to do. Transfer requires teaching, molding, feedback, and repetition. And it's your job to provide that for your team and your employees so that your company has a repeated structure to build on. As a founder, you have to keep saying what it is that you do and writing it down. Because what you don't want to do is hear your employees say they don't know how to handle clients. If you hear that, here's what you can diagnose it to mean. You, as the founder, have a need that you have filled only with yourself. And when we look closer as the founder, you probably haven't documented how to greet a client, how to explain the process, how to respond to complaints, how to handle delays, and how to protect the standard. And all of those are things that you probably do automatically, but if you don't write those processes down and hand them off to your new team and have them review them and check off and train them when they're working through the process, you cannot be surprised when you have glitches in the system. Remember, a founder needs a client communication standard, examples, scripts, and role plays. That's how you build a knowledge transfer. That's how you build a wisdom transfer. And when you do that, that's when wisdom becomes teachable. So I want you to ask yourself this final question. What wisdom in your business is still trapped inside your head or somebody else's head? And what would happen if that person could no longer carry it? If this episode resonated with you or helped you to think more about where your wisdom is buried within your organization, then make sure that you type the word transfer in the comments below. I'm Dr. Sakira Jackson, the CEO Whisperer, and this has been the Business Doctor Pasco. The Ask the Business Doctor podcast. Ooh.